dwell and live. And he went with him. So Jesus goes with this guy to his house. And now if you skip over, you go to 35, as they go there, it says, while he was speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? But overhearing what they said, Jesus says to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. Now, if you think about what you would do if we're at the hospital, right? Your mother, all right, is in the hospital. Doctor comes out and he says, I'm sorry, you know, your mom's, she's passed on. She didn't make it. And I walked up to you and I said, don't be afraid, man. Just believe. What would be your first reaction? What would be the first thing you want to do to me in that moment?
Probably punch you in the face.
Exactly. That's the answer I was hoping you'd get. Why?
Well, in a mundane sense, you're...
I mean, not making any sense. I mean,
Yeah.
believe in what, or I mean, who the heck are you? You know?
Right. Yeah. Who the heck are you to tell me that I need to just believe? She's dead. They have told me she is dead, and contrary to popular belief, when someone's dead, you kind of know right away that they're dead. Okay, and so they tell him that she's dead. Jesus tells him, "Do not fear, just believe." Then he goes in the house, and this is what's so crazy. He goes in the house. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw the commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, why are you making commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him. Now, here's what's crazy. People went from, what's the dynamic there? That's what's so crazy about this story. People went from mourning and weeping
to laughing at him.
They thought this dude was a straight joker. They went from boo-hoo to blah. This dude is flipped out. He's all the way left. Like, this is crazy. Okay? And then he goes in, he says something to her, tells her to, little girl, I say to you, arise. Talitha kum. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. So, once again in this story, they went through a wealth of emotions in a matter of moments. They went from weeping and crying, laughing, to almost having a heart attack.
Within like 5 minutes.
Yeah, because it's such a traumatic event. It's so real. And that's what's so real about that story. That is really what that would be like. If that were to happen, you would go through that quick, you would go through a flood of emotion. Someone young, it's like in your neighborhood, y'all are close, someone's child has just died. Everybody's upset, there's a lot of commotion, everything's going on. Then somebody just comes and saying, hey, don't worry, why are y'all, man, chill out, man, she's okay. She's just sleeping. What, man, get out of here, man. And then he's like, no, little girl, get up. Come here. And she gets up. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God. Like you would be.
That's breathtaking.
Yeah, you'd be like in shock. Everybody, dead is dead. Nobody comes back. Remember, we're talking about Jewish time. Remember we talked about this when we talked about the resurrection. They understood death very well because in the Jewish mindset, there wasn't no coming back from that.
Nothing.
So resurrection of the dead, even as a concept to them, was goofy. That's why they're laughing. To actually see it, you're on a whole nother, that's a whole nother level. Okay? Because you gotta remember Lazarus was dead and stinking. They said he'd been dead. Jesus let him die. Stay where he was, let him die. They said if you open the tomb, the funk is gonna hit you. He's dead. He is deader than disco dead. Okay? He's gone. Jesus, Lazarus, come forth. Like I said, it's just like waking somebody up from a nap. Dude, get up. That's the power it has. You hear in that right there, those moments, and I love what Lecrae says and Don't Waste Your Life. Paul says if Christ is resurrected, we wasted our lives. What that implies is our lives built around Jesus being alive. So not only is his resurrection important, but even before we get to his resurrection, the fact that he can raise the dead, which is the most, I would have to say, like, out of anything, raising the dead has got to be the most,
especially in Lazarus terms, and he was already
right, dead,
smelling,
right,
stinking dead, I guess, in a sense.
Right, he's decaying, and calls him back to life. So, once again, we read stories like this, and like I said, this is what I mean by, like, when I read them, I realize, and listening to Rico talk about it, I realize that we don't use that enough, because you really don't need anything after that. It's like, why do you believe in Jesus? He healed the sick. He forgave sins. He rose people from the dead. He had power over nature. Why would I not believe in Jesus? If all of that is true, if this is historical data, which it has been proven that it is, why would I not believe this? There'd have to be something wrong with me for me not to believe this, and that's exactly, now that's where you hit them, because that's exactly what it is. There is something wrong with you. The same thing that was wrong with that paralytic. You're paralyzed too. You're paralyzed, I'm paralyzed. We're paralyzed in sin. We can't get up from it. Because we're like that little girl. We're dead in it. And unless Jesus calls us out, wakes us up from that, because he's the only one who has the power to do it, then that's what all those miracles were pointing to. I am the only one who has the power and the authority to fix this. I'm the only one who can show you how to live for God, and I'm the only one who can heal you from the ailments that keep you from being able to live for God. So Jesus did it on, like, he didn't just talk it out, he walked it out. And that in and of itself too is a big deal. So that's why when it comes to the God, that's why we talk about the gospel being, like, so important. That's why we talk about, using the gospel when you actually speak to people, and not just using, like, good advice things, like, don't you want to come to church with me because we got a family life center, or don't you want to come? This is it right here. This is what is going to make the difference. Yes, they might read this and they're going to be just like those people at that little girl's house, at Jairus' house. You will start talking to people and they will laugh you out of the room. They're going to be like, ha, ha. I'm going to keep doing what I want to do, bro. You go ahead, you believe your fairy tales and your resurrection from the dead. But also remember that once you've told them, you've done what you need to do, and one day they're going to also be like those people at that house again. Because everybody's going to come to grips with death, one way or the other, whether it's your own or somebody else's. And then on the last day, everybody's going to be just as shocked as everybody was in Jairus' house too. When you see massive resurrection, possibly including yourself, thinking you were dead and gone, and you had nothing left to worry about. And now all the things that you thought and that you could have imagined, the death that you died that was so horrible, burned in a car fire, killed on 9/11, all those things that you thought were so horrible. Think of the worst death: you drowned alive, killed at the hands of your own lover. All the deaths that you thought were so horrible, not knowing Christ now makes all of that a cakewalk compared to what you are now going to face at the judgment seat of God and in hell. It's now going to become exponentially worse. That's why this is so important to tell people, because this is what matters, whether they realize it or not. And it's not our job to make them And I think that's the two. Our ego gets in the way a little bit. You know, we go out thinking, man, I want people to listen to me, and we say, man, I want people to believe the gospel. But a lot of times, what will happen is our ego get in the way, where we really just want people to listen to us and believe us. You know, my personal testimony is great. You know, like I said, I was sitting there talking to our friend at work, giving her my life. Yeah, I can sit there and tell her about how I don't need to worry about rap stars because everything rappers done, I've probably done at least once in my lifetime. But that's not going to bring her to Jesus.
No.
That lets her know that I've changed. But what's really going to bring her to Jesus is, hey, you know Jesus can heal the sick. He raised the dead. He walked on water.
He can stop a hurricane?
He can stop a hurricane. So if he can do that, and most importantly, he forgives sins. All that stuff is easy compared to that.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
like he said, the only person who forgives sins is the person you've offended. So if I make an offense, the only person who forgive me if I do something against you, your mama can't forgive me. Your daddy can't forgive me. You can. Jesus forgives sins because he is God on earth, and we've all, through our sin, offended God. We have committed cosmic treason. Jesus forgives sins. That's the ultimate thing he does for us. He forgives sins, and he resurrects us spiritually because we're spiritually dead. All those miracles point to a bigger thing spiritually. It shows that Jesus does operate in the natural world, but also he shows what he does for us spiritually. Just like when John the Baptist asked, before John the Baptist died, he sends one of his disciples. John wants to know, are you the real deal? Are you the one? He says to him in response, go back and tell him that the blind see and the lame walk, etc., etc. He goes on a long thing. Why does he use that?
To take drastic things to make people believe?
Because it's to show that he really is the one. Jesus does those things. Like I said, he spiritually raises us from our paralysis and sin. Our sin, the death that sin brings, he raises us out of that into life in him. These are important things. These stories point to that. We have to tell these. This is the only thing we got. This is all we got. You don't have nothing else. No matter how good my testimony might be, it's really not that impressive compared to this.
No.
I can tell you about how I used to drink and smoke and chew and date women that do and party all night, and then one night I realized it was all empty and Jesus came in and saved my life. That is still not as impressive as Jesus raised a 12-year-old girl off her deathbed. Jesus healed a paralytic and he forgave his sins. There's nothing more impressive than that. And that's why Paul says the gospel is foolishness to those who are perishing. Because they hear all that stuff and they just go, man. So don't gloss over it. Take it in. Because if you don't take it in, you will gradually, slowly but surely, you'll start to mistake Jesus for somebody else. You won't see him as the real deal. You'll see him, but you won't see him for what he really is. Because if you don't have this, you don't see him for what he really is. That's why people go, yeah, Jesus is cool. That's why people can say things like, I believe Jesus was a kind, caring person and he'll forgive me of all my sins when we get to the end. That's because you don't understand the crucifixion. That's because you don't understand the resurrection. That's because you don't understand that for 2,000 years people have been slandering, mocking, saying vicious, heinous things about this guy, like Elton John, who came out and said he believes that Jesus was a gay man. Because that's the Jesus that he's made up in his mind. And that's not even a strike out against homosexuality particularly. That's actually more of an attack on Elton John personally for saying what he said when you have documentation of what the case actually is.
I guess it's easier for everybody to make up their own story.
Yes, it's always easier for you, man. Because what would you rather believe? Would you rather believe in a God who's just, and I like what Paul Washer says.
I don't think people like to think that they're that horrible.
What's the most terrible attribute of God's character?
His forgiveness.
That he judges.
Mm-hmm. That he's good, and he's a good judge. He's a just judge. Yes, exactly. That is the most terrifying thing, that he holds you accountable and he will judge you. So if you choose to stand on your own against all the eyewitness account, what you were saying is, I, like old girl said in Reason for God, I am responsible.
Yeah, I'm okay with whatever.
With taking the account for my own sins.
Yeah.
Really? And you know what that shows? That's blatant. That shows you don't believe in a just judge. Because if you really believe that you're sinful, one, it shows you don't believe you're really that sinful. You don't believe you're as heinous as you really are. Two, you're showing that you don't really believe in God or a just judge at all. Because if you did, that's like a death row inmate sitting in a courtroom, chilling. He's killed somebody. He knows he's done it, and he's just sitting there chilling because he feels like the judge is not going to give me. He's not throwing the book at me, so what am I worried about? That's what that would be like. And if a judge did that here on earth, what would you want to have happen to him?
Off the bench, man.
Off the bench. But yet we expect God to do that for us. People, not that we pray for it, not that we ask for mercy, people expect that. God wouldn't kill everybody. God is love, remember?
Yeah, but then you're right. But God is also a just God.
Right, he's a just God. God cannot, because for God to not be just, he sacrifices his righteousness, and then if he sacrifices righteousness, he ceases to be God. God is serious about his own glory. That's why Adam and Eve had to get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. That's why we have to die. That's why Jesus had to come and die in our place, because God is serious about his glory. On anybody else, that would be selfish. But that is the best gift God can ever give to us, is himself. It would be selfish of God to not give us himself. It would go against him being just, righteous, merciful, all his characteristics that he is. That would be ungodly. So in the same way, it would be ungodly for God to not punish sin. See what I mean? So that's what we have to do. We have to look at these. We have to take them into account. You know, we have to say this is the gospel. And
yeah, well, I guess in my younger years, I guess I was like that. I just, oh, that's cool. He raised the dead. Oh, he can calm this. He feed 5,000 people what, 2 fish and 2 loaves of bread. No.
Right, it makes for a great story. Right?
Yeah, it's a great story, but it's also, I guess, well, how can I say it? Yes, it is a great story, but it's also a great base to use the gospel in the proper way, I guess you could say.
Well, they point to things. You know, they show you things about who Jesus is.
Well, that no man or no anything existing in this planet has ever done anything like that.
Right. There's nobody else who can make the claims of Christ.
Nobody. They never will.
And if you think about it, the real telltale sign is no one else ever has. Not Buddha, not Muhammad, no other religious leader, not even in Mormonism, where Joseph Smith is held in such high esteem, has anybody said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. Nobody else has made those claims. Nobody.
And that's serious.
That's serious. That's a serious claim. Because that takes away all debate. There are no other paths to God. There are no other ways to God.
Well, it's not one. That's not one of the ways. It's not one of the best ways. It's
it is the way.
The way.
It is the way. That's why Christians in the early days, they weren't known as Christians. Christians is actually a derogatory term that we've turned good. They were actually called followers of the way. Because that's what they were. They were followers of the way. The only way that was given. The only thing mentioned to give access to God was Jesus Christ. And no other prophet has made that claim. Nobody else. You gotta do, and like I said, man, like that's what I had to come to. I gotta do something with that.